Hello.
Hey, Stacy.
How are you?
Pretty good. I'm actually finally feeling kind of normal. Like sleeping through the
Were
night.
you ever normal?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I really
Now that you're sleeping now, that's good.
yeah, I actually slept until 7 this morning. 1 hour before the call.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm
How are you?
surprised Barry's not here. And come to think of it, I don't know if I've seen him posting.
He did post something yesterday, right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Which I'll shoot him a text just to. Mhm.
Yeah. Since he collects or fixes old PCs and computers,
Yeah,
I found an ad for somebody who had an old Apple Lisa. And I sent it to Barry yesterday and he responded.
good.
Remember the old Apple Lisa?
No, I don't. I just discovered the internet in the late 90s. No, in 2000. In the 2000, what am I talking about? Probably like not until like 2010.
Where you been, Stacy? Out living life and having fun? Come on.
I was living in suburbia. Yeah. I was driving two cars and having 2.3 kids.
Suburbia actually has a lot of people who discovered online life early.
I discovered it through Facebook. I mean, before that, my kids would go on what was it called? MySpace.
Yep.
And before that, I remember when I was single, that's when they first had like these like online ads for singles. I don't even really remember much about it because I didn't have my own computer. But when I started dating my ex-husband, he had a computer.
Wait, you don't
So
remember AOL used to give away these CDs
yeah, I do. That's what I
by the
remember. That
billions?
was the big
By the
that.
billions.
But the only thing, so my kid, I had a computer that my kids could use to play like Reader Rabbit and some of the computer games. But
Hmm.
I had no use for a computer because I had a telephone. I
Yep.
went on the computer because my friends' kids were all having bar mitzvahs and they would put the pictures up there. So the only way I could see the pictures if I wasn't with them in person is to sign up. So that's what I did. And in the beginning, I wouldn't even like let people know I was on. Like I didn't want friends in the beginning. I was very selective. And then once Trump started running and I got drawn into politics, especially because Bernie and Hillary people were fighting and I saw the disaster that was going to happen. That's when I got involved. And that got me wanting to write again. But I was able to write like short snippets, which is I like to do. I'm a typical American. I want it short and sweet, not necessarily sweet.
Well, yes, that was a disaster with the Democratic Party. It still is a disaster.
Well, what scared me today is I heard briefly that No Labels, which is an organization I know about, I actually went to Washington to one of their conventions. They're, trying to get on the ballot in all 50 states, which any other election might be a great idea. This particular upcoming election might not be such a good idea because it would probably benefit the extremists on the right because it would pick off some of the Democrat vote.
Yeah, it's tough to call because all the rumors now, I guess the media has really bought into this, Tuesday indictment rumor. And so now
I just posted right before I just commented, somebody said that, and I just said, let's change the chant. Trump deserves his day in court.
Right.
Simple.
That's right. He does.
We're all
That's what he's all
equal.
about.
We're all equal.
That's right. Let's
So,
all listen to the evidence. Let's all take a look at every gruesome detail.
well, so I actually have a topic. I was thinking that Barry and Josh were going to be here. And so I put a little bit of thought into, with the three of you, what would I actually want to hear about? Because as you know, I'm always saying if we were in the right conversations, it might be better. They're not here, but I could still hear your opinion. Well, so
I'd
this,
love to hear your questions. I'd love to figure
okay.
what's on your mind.
So it occurs to me, so I was listening a little bit to, I want to know politics. It occurs to me when people talk about the threat of like TikTok, that there's two separate issues going on when it comes to threat. One of the threats has to do with, I guess you'd call it the architecture of the internet. So like the threats that might have to do with things like, hacking or phishing or whatever other words there are. I don't know. I'm not a tech person, but it's that kind of a threat of being able to get into somebody's system. Totally different threat is the threat of perception and social media and what we saw happen with fake posts and things like that. And it's clear to me that number one, people don't know the difference. And so if they don't know the difference, when we're having these discussions, which most people don't understand about, I don't, and I listen really carefully, and I'm friends with a lot of tech people. But even as I watch the conversations among tech people, I'm not sure that they're both talking about the same threat at the same time. So I wanted, number one, a beginner's mind conversation to explain the architecture part of where threats can happen, like how that can happen, like clicking on a link or things like that. And I thought that it would be perfect, the combination of you, Joshua, and Barry combined a level of expertise. But having the three of you in the room, I felt confident that any bias that came out would be checked by the other two. And that's my formula for conversations.
Cool. Well, I'll try to check my own bias then.
Yeah.
I actually think there's at least one more threat in this whole social media thing, and that is
Okay.
that when anyone has access to the aggregate data, then they can use or abuse almost at will. And that's, I think, distinct from the two that you had identified.
I think it's actually tied into the two that I identified, because I think
each of them is connected.
that's a perfect third point. And that so what you just identified, that was actually behind or underneath the question to start with, because I was thinking about, right now the threat is focused on TikTok and China. But the same way that TikTok and China is a threat for the different reasons, which I still would like to clarify, anybody with that aggregate of information. Yes, so that's correct. Exactly my point.
That is correct. Google does, Facebook does, Apple does, Microsoft does. They're all basically only as good as their own practiced code of ethics. Not stated, not documented, exactly. Practiced.
And so I think it's so important that not only do Congress people that are making the decisions understand the first two that I talked about, which I don't think they do, but all of us, average Americans, we should be literate and understand how these things work.
Yep. In fact, it's for similar reasons that big monopolies get broken up. AT&T, they had the entire country's network. Well, we can't have that. They got every data, they got every connection. We got to bust them up. That was the government reasoning. And Barry loves to tell that story, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if Facebook now has every piece of data on everyone, or Google or Apple or TikTok or Twitter, you name it, okay? They are susceptible to that very same argument, except right now we have an incompetent government. Either that or the original argument wasn't valid in the first place, as Barry likes to point out.
Again, I don't think people understand. So could you start with one of my questions? Like,
Okay,
yeah.
so the architectural issue, it's the way you characterized it sounded to me like what people call social engineering. In other words, what they're playing on are people's vulnerabilities. The fact that people don't understand the way technology works, they're very naively clicking on links just like they would on the internet. So they believe that links are safe. But in actuality, these links basically are activating code that can do anything. So this code, if malevolent, could be reading some of your data and collecting it and putting it somewhere, or telling you a falsehood and making you click on something else, or asking you questions because they think, oh, I'm going to pretend to be a valid form collecting information about some benefit you're going to get, but in actuality is actually looking for information that could actually correlate you with others and build bigger pictures. So all of this malware obviously is directed against naive people, and there's a lot of them. That's why tens or hundreds of millions get siphoned off of the economy by these people who are very, very unethical.
So is it fair to say that anytime you click on a link anywhere, you're exposing yourself to anything?
No, it is not that way. The internet actually has some trusted mechanisms in it. Okay.
Okay.
So for example, if you look in your browser URL bar, the one that says HTTPS blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
If there's a lock next to that URL and you're using a trusted browser, you're using one of the modern trusted browsers.
I have a lock.
That means that connection is at least cryptographically secure, which means from you to the server, the first server, okay? Now, the thing to know is many of these links bounce you from server to server to server. But at least the link from you to the first server you get to is at least cryptographically sound. So that at least that one little link, okay, is not something that other people could compromise easily. If they truly went after it, they could, but it's not easy. Okay.
So if I clicked on a trusted site, now I'm safe. The lock was there. I'm safe. But now that trusted site, I takes me to an article I'm reading.
That's right.
Can I tell by looking up at my browser to see if the lock is there, if that article site is safe?
First thing you need to do is before you click it, you hover over that link. If you hover over that link, you'll actually see down at the lower left, usually in your browser, okay, what that link is actually going to take you to, okay? Now, most people will just click on it simply because the link is either blue or it says HTTPS, Amazon.com, blah, 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 and they trust that thing, okay? But it is possible for it to appear as Amazon or USPS or anything, but actually take you someplace else. That is actually possible.
And how would you know the difference?
Because if you look at the link and you look at the lower left when you hover it and they're different, that's malware.
Okay.
Okay. So most people don't know this. Most people don't check that. But, if you go to a reputable site like, mercurynews.com or Boston Globe or whatever it is, they're probably going to be relatively trustworthy with their links. Okay. So you probably get a little bit less suspicious. But it is always possible. Like, for example, if somebody advertises there and they actually put a bad link in their advertisement, okay? Boston Globe may not be quite so careful about those. They should be, but sometimes they'll actually let something like that through. Same with every big company, okay? Microsoft, Bing, Google, blah, 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 okay? So that's the first thing. Before you click on anything, look in the lower left. Like, for example, go to your browser right now. Whatever page you got up, go to some link there and hover over it and see what you see.
So let me ask you a question then. again, let's just try to take it from a beginner's mind and in terms of legislation. Would it make sense to have legislation that makes the company responsible for anything they link to being safe?
I won't say absolutely yes. I won't say absolutely no. I think that's a good question to debate. Okay. Because the question is, how responsible is the platform provider for the content that's put on there? Because a lot of them just have a platform and anybody can put content up there. Reddit, for example, is like that. Anybody could put any link on Reddit. Literally, I can go there right now and put any link on Reddit. You could as well. Okay.
Is there a way to maybe request like a safeguard, like a warning label or something? I'm just thinking about consumer protections.
Yes. Usually those will be disclosed in the terms of use. In other words, something like a news provider will say, hey, we do our best, but we don't make a guarantee. Other providers, like a platform provider that usually doesn't have any content whatsoever, but relies on their users, they'll have a different disclosure. They're going to say, we're not responsible for anything. You better go check out whatever link you're going to be clicking on. Okay. Those terms of use will be very different between those two types. And there's others, but at least those two types of sites will have different terms of use.
Right, but nobody reads those. So I'm thinking that maybe if it was mandated that at that certain point, and I can't describe it, I understand what you're saying, but somebody with more knowledge would have to write it the way it would be, the proper way. But that at that point where the consumer's in danger, something pops up for them to read in clear language.
Okay, so Facebook, I think, attempts to do something like this. In other words, if there's a clear link that you click on while you're in Facebook and it's going to take you someplace outside of Facebook, sometimes I do see a notice saying, hey, this link is going to take you away from Facebook. Are you sure you want to go there? Okay. Now, this is in their self-interest also. They don't want you leaving Facebook. They want you to maximize your engagement with them. So there's more than just ethics at play there.
Right, but it's still a good thing. It's like it's still a good thing, even though they did it for maybe different reasons. Still a good thing. So that should go in the list of things that, I really think that people with more knowledge, like you and other people that I know, need to get together and write some recommendations and give it to Congress. I honestly do, because we're screwed otherwise. Because people don't know what they're doing.
Oh, come on. Don't you trust Zuck? He's already done everything he could for us.
I don't trust people in Congress, but not necessarily because I think they're all bad. I think just like most of the American people, they don't really understand it.
They're lawyers. They're not tech people.
Yeah. And they don't ask. Or they don't ask the right questions to the right people.
Yeah, I think it's valid. I think it's a good thing for kind of a consumer protection agency action to take that kind of a move. It's like having a consumer reports for the internet, right?
Yeah.
In fact, some browsers will do this. Some will warn you, hey, this is a bad link. Do you want to go there? In fact, browsers are getting better about that. Do you use Chrome, or do you use Firefox, or do you use IE, or what do you use?
I don't even know. Let me look.
You know how to check? In your browser, the very last menu item should be something like About. And if you click on...
You know what? I'm looking at my browser and it's showing me Zoom.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I don't know.
So if you go to your browser...
Wave browser. Wave browser.
Wave?
Yeah.
I don't know about Wave. Let me double check that.
Okay.
You're on a Windows or you're on a Macintosh?
Windows.
Okay.
Hi, Josh.
Wave browser. Actually, who installed that for you? That's interesting.
I don't know. It just showed up.
Oh, you may get it from your internet provider. Is it Wave Telecom? I don't know. I haven't heard of
Honestly,
Wave
it didn't used to be Wave, and I didn't want it to be Wave.
browser.
But at one point, my computer reinstalled, and that's what showed up.
Ah, well, you might have clicked on something that said try Wave, and that's what happened then.
Maybe.
Because typically you're either going to have Edge if you're on a Microsoft clean system, or you're going to have Firefox, or you're going to have Chrome. It's most likely you're going to have one of those.
I used to have Chrome. I don't know how it changed.
So in Wave, if you go to the last menu item, I've never used it, so I'm just guessing. It should be about. In other words, the very last menu item should say about. So if you click on it, one of the items should be about Wave.
Yeah. You know what? I
No?
don't know, but let's forget this part. I'm not interested. I don't care.
Anyway, there are browsers, like I'm saying, that'll protect you from malware to a certain extent. Okay. And Brave is one of them. I use Brave, which is a Chrome-based browser, and that's trusted because Chrome is open source, or at least most of it. And it's
Well, yeah. The thing is, Sam, I think the reason I came with these questions is because I don't want people to have to protect themselves. If Congress is working on this now, I want Congress to understand enough that they can protect me.
so here's an actual interesting philosophical question. Okay. If you're walking down the street downtown, midnight, okay, is it the government's job to protect you? And in certain ways, I can see the answer being yes. In certain ways, I can see the answer being no. In other words, if I'm walking down the street alone and somebody jumps me, what structure in government would need to be in place that event be successfully and 100% prevented? That's very interesting if you really expect the government to take that responsibility. Versus, is it a shared responsibility? Versus, is it solely my responsibility? The government needs to have some responsibility there. But the question is, does it need to have all the responsibility there?
So if I needed to go onto that street in order to vote, then I think the government is responsible to keep me safe. If I don't need to go on that street, then it's my own responsibility. But we're now living in a society where basically I need to be on the internet to have the same opportunities as other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a multifaceted conversation here, because I hope you can see that the safeguards in place to prevent every possible vulnerability for you being on the internet could potentially be quite egregious. And it could be used by a, shall I even say, fascist state to justify a lot of what they do.
Right. But the other half of my question really had to do with getting that beginner's information out there. Yeah. Because you have people coming into the conversation without the beginner's level information.
Right.
And I think that's a big problem with many topics.
Exactly. I would say here's a parallel, right? In order to drive, you have to be taught, some number of hours, and you're taught something called defensive driving, right? Don't be aggressive, be careful, allow space, blah, 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 right? But getting on the internet, all you need to do is pay that installation bill, and you're $40 a month. You're there. They don't give you any training for being on the internet. They don't even tell you what car to drive or what browser to use, So yes, something like that would be advisable, I think, if we were trying to help each other out. Yeah. And, there's no equivalent of the AAA, right? If you encounter a problem on the internet, do you have an equivalent of a AAA that you can go to and say, hey, my password got vulnerable,
you can't even call Facebook. That was my biggest issue.
Facebook's not going to take your phone call. Are you kidding?
Well, unless you're in the 1% and you know somebody that works there.
That's not Facebook then. That's a different phone number. That's an individual. Right? That's not Facebook.
I don't know. Depends how, I don't know.
Right.
But the point is, yeah, you need some sort of human interaction in there.
It'll be a bot. It'll be a bot. Yeah. I was like, Stacy, what's your problem today? How are you feeling? Okay. Let me ask you these 17 questions so you get bored and hang up. You know,
Oh my God, terrible. Yeah. I'm a big one. Talk to someone. Talk to someone. Talk to
before we
someone.
get you to a live agent, let me determine what kind of question you needed answered. Okay. And it goes on and on with another 5 or 7 questions.
In the beginning, I used to be able to just pretend I had a rotary phone. Now that's not even an option.
Anyway, so that was my response to your first question. Well, I am sure it's not adequate, but how do
No,
you?
I think it's a great start. I think that the beginning of our call would be a great clip to put out because I think a lot of people are interested. Part of what we need in our country is education, and it doesn't have to be public school education because grown-ups need to be educated too.
You just hit a nerve. You just hit a nerve. There's a whole faction of society that's working actively so that we don't get educated.
Correct.
And I would say that's borderline evil, if not actually evil. You know?
And that's one of those conversations where I say, and it depends where you're standing and who, because the people doing it don't see the evil that we're seeing. They're seeing something different.
Yes.
That's what
They think
they're
they're helping
focusing
us.
on.
They think they're helping society. Yes.
Exactly. And that's why, again, I really think it goes back to ground zero, getting to the beginner information so that people can decide which path they want to follow. But when you're coming in and you're just hearing so many things, you can't make the best decisions. But now if I know, all right, well, this is how a threat is posed, I can make a decision. But when I also know, because we didn't talk about the perception part of it. So let's say one of my questions, I feel like, okay, well, that's not going to affect me, but I'm not aware of the other threats. I'm not thinking about that. So I have to understand not only, I have to understand where things get separated. When people argue, they lump everything together. And that's on all sides. It's not just people on the far right that do that. People on the left do that too. If it makes their argument,
What do you
say it
mean?
again.
What do you mean by that?
So sometimes if it makes somebody's argument stronger, they will include information that they know is not necessarily true.
Yeah, that's questionable ethics also. Yes.
And I've gone head to head with people like that who otherwise share my politics. So it's not just limited to, one faction. A lot of people do that. Yeah.
Yeah, in
So
fact, one of the worst ways of doing that is, oh, that person's not electable, quote unquote. Okay. Not based on anything having to do with real data, but it's just a stated opinion that person's not electable.
well, I'm sure I will hit a sore point because it was one for me too. I was so mad at Bill Maher because he did that to Bernie.
Yes, absolutely. I'm pissed off at him. Bernie got shoved aside and discounted simply because of this. Oh, he's not electable bullshit.
But we have to move past that.
Well,
But
this
I agree
country
with you.
is still suffering from all of that bullshit.
But that's why I keep going back to saying the same thing. The way we solve that is to start with the beginner's mind. We have to explain things and understand things on a fifth grade level so that people can at least be open.
Most people would be, I suspect.
I
There's
think,
certain people who've demonstrated that they're not.
but they're much fewer than we think. It's just that they're so loud.
No,
I
some
think,
of them are in positions of power.
but I'm not talking about that yet because they get to positions of power for a reason. So I always like to focus at, where it starts. Those people that get there have been enabled their whole lives. I want to get there before it starts.
In the meantime, that new generation that you're focused on has to grow up. And so that old generation wielding unjustified power and surprising stupidity is still exerting influence on society, you know, and so we
which
still
is,
have to suffer that.
again, that's why I think it's more important than ever that we focus on the basic understanding for things for average people like me. I mean, I know a lot more now than I knew 6 years ago, but that's because I listened, I asked questions, I did more work than a lot of people would be willing to do, but that doesn't mean that we can't bring the information to them. Because what I realized about TikTok, and that's what really clicked in my brain when I said the different kinds of threat, I was watching some really powerful clips. I'm not on TikTok, but sometimes somebody will share something and I'm like, oh, that's why they're so afraid. It's so powerful to see this video in my face. So it wasn't about the architecture so much, but it was about, oh my God, yes. Because I saw how it affected me.
So may I ask you a personal question?
Of course.
You say up until 6 years ago, you didn't know as much, but at 6 years ago, you switched. You actually did more conversation, more research, etc. Up until 6 years ago, what was your mode of operations and what prevented you from looking at these issues before then?
6 years ago, I was a lot more trusting. Um, I didn't understand anything about technology. I didn't understand, well, it wasn't just me. A lot of people didn't understand that your computer, somebody could hear what you're saying through your microphone or your camera. You know, it was before Zoom, and maybe it's 7 years ago. Maybe I'm off by a year. Um, it just was like, like people would have thought you were crazy. So I understand that more is possible. And plus I have friends that are in technology, so I've heard their conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But it took a while to piece things together because you get bits and pieces depending on the sector you're talking to.
Mm-hmm. Would it be fair to say that up until then, basically the most complicated technology I had to deal with was the telephone? And you
Correct.
basically trusted the telephone, right? You made a
Yes.
call, you get a call, you talk to the person, you hang up, nothing bad happens, right?
Telephone's a great example. Let me just stop you because I was always very conscious because of the way I grew up. Don't say anything incriminating over the telephone because somebody could listen in. So we knew that kind of
Lily
tech.
Tomlin is listening in, right?
Well, we saw it in movies. We saw it in movies that, your phones could be tapped. So we were aware of that possibility.
Yep.
If you heard a click on the phone, you were like, is somebody listening in? And then actually there were times where I remember a few times where all of a sudden I'd be on the phone and I'd hear a whole other conversation and we'd be like, did you hear that? You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
but that was, and then you figured, okay. And plus I remember when I was a kid, we would go away and we actually had a switchboard. So, and I worked the switchboard. So I know how you could, so it made sense that, okay, those things could happen because it was simple enough technology that you could figure out something would be put in the wrong hole or the connection would be continued. Like it sort of made sense.
Yep.
But with computers, I have no clue how that works. I still have no clue how it works.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And while it was simple and you understood it, and it was, some lady at a switchboard doing, relatively predictable things. Yeah, you knew there was a risk, but you also knew, hey, let's not talk about the checking account, while we're on the phone here. You waited till you actually met in person, right?
You knew not to give your social security number over the phone.
Yeah, so it's interesting how, and the reason I picked the telephone, by the way, is there's clearly other technology before the telephone, but they were receive only. Like you got a TV, the only way you use the TV was it would send information to you. There's no way you could send information out to the world using a TV. The telephone was the only way that you could actually send information out, unless you were into like shortwave radio and all this kind of ham business, okay? But for most people, the telephone was the only way for information to go from you to someone else. And if it could to someone you intended, then there's always a vulnerability that it could go to someone you didn't intend. And that's where the vulnerability begins. Is somebody could hack you. And in fact, Steve Jobs was one of those hackers, okay? I don't know if you know this, but that's how he got famous early.
No idea.
Yeah, he built something called the blue box that hacked phone calls. And he and his high school buddies were very famous for doing that.
Wow.
Yes, go look it up. It's I'm not making this up.
No, I totally believe you.
I think they're called phone freakers with a PHR. Okay.
Ah, there he is.
He's here.
Too much time on their hands. I mean, that's an interesting thing to set out to do as a high schooler.
Yeah, he was in high school. He was just having fun playing with technology. Okay. This is before Apple 1, before the Apple 2. Yeah.
Hey, Barry, you okay?
We worship Steve Jobs, so we don't talk about that illegal, unethical side of his background.
Yeah, let's go back to that in a minute. I just want to check in with Barry for 1 second.
Hey,
You okay?
Barry.
Hi. I fell asleep.
Oh, you
I've
look
done that.
really-
I was sitting here and I fell asleep and I just opened my eyes. I go, oh, it's 11:30.
We've been talking about, well, Sam, you could describe what we've been talking about.
Stacy's asking about how can we protect the regular people from malware on the internet. And
Can't.
Wait, Alex, no, I came in with a beginner's question stating that I understand there's a threat that has to do with internet architecture, which is separate from the threat of like social media perception. And that I felt that an interesting conversation, specifically if it were you and Sam and Joshua, would be for me to be able to listen to those different threats and kind of separate them, because too often people lump everything together. And I feel that as the hearings are going on in Congress, even people in Congress don't understand what they're talking about or why something's a threat. So that's
When you said caused by the infrastructure itself, is that what you said?
I think she said architecture.
Architecture itself? That I would be hard pressed to nominate anything in the architecture that would be a threat for malware.
Well, Sam actually answered that question for me. So we're past that. Now we're talking about Steve Jobs in high school, how he wreaked havoc. So that was the old conversation. Now we're on the
for phone freaking or something like that.
That's
Did
right.
you do phone freaking? It's not anything that's a scandal. I mean, it's a known story.
Yep. Well, it's not necessarily legal.
It's not, well, I don't know. I mean, phone freaking was a thing back when the Captain Crunch days. Did you tell her about the Captain Crunch story?
I didn't want to go into a lot of detail. He's one of the famous felons, I guess, or
I want to hear it.
It's very simple. There's a breakfast cereal.
I'll put a link, by the way. You can click on that link while Barry's speaking.
Okay, I know the breakfast cereal. I know
Not the breakfast cereal. Not the breakfast cereal.
Sorry, Barry, go ahead.
And it had a premiums in it. So one of the premiums was a little whistle. And it just so happened that the frequency of the whistle was exactly the same as the frequency that when you dropped a quarter into a payphone, it goes bong or something like that. It was exactly one of those frequencies. There's three tones. There were a nickel, a dime, and a quarter. They have three different tones in the old days. And this whistle was equal to one of them. So you pick up the phone and you blow the whistle, and it sounded like, that you put the money in it. And that was called phone freaking. And there was a guy whose name I now forget, who discovered this Captain Crunch whistle and sort of made it famous. And so phone freaking was kind of a thing that once you learned that you could just generate these three tones, then they would build these little oscillators. And you'd put the oscillator up and you press either the the nickel, the dime, or the 25-cent button, it would generate the frequency that was exactly the right one. And that meant that the telephone network thought you'd put the money in it. That was called in-band signaling, was trivial. Okay. And so people would make these phone calls all over the country with this, bing bong bong thingy. And as far as I know, that was one of the things that Steve Jobs played around with back when he was a teenager, or something similar to it, if not that exact thing.
See, I would call those Robin Hood crimes because
they're victims. Well, they're not victims in the sense that you're using up resources on the telephone network.
You're stealing from Barry. Come on.
I wasn't, let's see, when did I joined Bell Labs in 68. So yeah, I guess by that
Yes,
time,
he was already stealing from you. You were already there.
I was already getting paid by the ratepayers of, but anyway.
You got cheated out of multiple pennies because of this phenomenon.
Now, here's the funny thing. When at Bell Labs, we had an outgoing long distance line that you could dial a code to dial out long distance. And we would use that all the time, to make, personal phone calls at home or whatever. And one time when I was at Stanford, there were a bunch of Stanford alums who were Bell Labs employees, and they wanted to listen to the big game. And so they dialed my apartment. I was at Stanford at the time. They dialed my apartment on that outgoing line. I put the phone next to the radio, the local radio, whatever it was, and they were listening to the Stanford game over, a free phone call from Bell Labs, so they could listen to the big game because it wasn't broadcast nationwide or some crazy thing like that. I don't know except the whole story, but.
Now you see, if that were happening in these days, there'd be more resources into finding the culprits there than there would be into.
Here the internet is well, actually, no, we're paying ISP, so we don't pay individual long distance calls anymore. We're international on the internet for one flat fee a month. So anyway, that's.
I don't know why Sam is coming in twice. I guess maybe he was having internet problems.
I don't know.
Do we have to let him in?
No, he lets himself in.
No, it's because I'm going to go get coffee and I want to still be able to hear it.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I think my nephew was a kleptomaniac when he was a teenager. He would steal building materials from neighborhood lots that were under construction. Then he went into the business, went into the building business himself as an adult. So, it kind of balances out in the long run. Steve Jobs gave it all back by inventing the iPod and the Macintosh and all that stuff. So. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we weren't bad mouthing him in any way. We were not at all.
But yeah, I mean, you can look up these stories about phone freaking and all this kind of nonsense.
No, the reason it even came up is Sam, I think, was making a point of how things used to be simpler. I think you were going in that direction in terms of how much responsibility is on the individual to protect themselves. I think that might be why he was bringing that up. I don't know.
Oh. Well,
You're
I mean,
muted. Sam,
everybody gets hacked. I'd be hard pressed to find anybody who never got hacked, either by some, telephone or internet or some crazy deal. Sam, do you want to say something?
I was making a point about the fact that, up until we had transmission technology from the person out to the world, we didn't have to worry about such vulnerabilities. Before that, all the technology basically delivered information into the home or to the individual. But with the telephone, that was the first time anybody could actually receive information from your home or from you, the individual. And at that time, people trusted the network. Okay, they trusted AT&T, they trusted the neighborhood switchboard operator, they trusted all of this stuff. And even Stacy says, hey, she knew not to talk about, bank accounts and, passwords, not passwords, but, sensitive social security numbers, et cetera, on the phone. Okay, except that now with the advent of new technologies where you have more modes of sending information from you, the individual, or from you, your household, out into the world, there are that many more places where someone could actually try and make your conversation or your interaction vulnerable. They could compromise it.
Yeah.
And going from the switchboard to the internet, that's a huge step forward that some people didn't make until, even Stacy says, until about a dozen years ago. So
Internet's been around since about 1985 or a little bit later.
Not for normal people didn't hear about it till the early 90s.
Yeah, you and I are not normal people. We agree with that.
Okay.
We heard about it. We just didn't access it. There was no need for it.
I mean, we had teenagers on the internet by 1990 when I left MITRE and joined BBN. We already had teenagers on the Cleveland Freenet, I think was one of the first big communities that got on. And I started that online learning community in 1990, and we already had teenagers on the internet in 1990.
Kids. Well, I mean, would you agree that for the people that came after the 90s, I think the reason they came were social reasons.
Well, actually, the internet went public around 95. I mean, went commercial.
92,
95.
93. It was earlier than that.
It was earlier than that.
Yeah.
It sort of depends on what you want to call the actual time. But yeah, in the mid 90s, it went commercial. And that's when the National Science Foundation turned over the supervision of the NSFNet science network to the telephone company so they could let it go public and commercial. And that was sort of the end of the era when it was the gold. I don't know if you want to call it the golden age. I don't actually have a good term of art here, but up until about 95, we were hoping that the internet was not going to go commercial. It was going to be an education and research network only. And we were working in that direction, and we lost it. You know, the Congress decided to let it go public and let it go commercial. Not so much let it go public, let it go commercial.
Well, may I say something there?
Yeah, please.
Up until that point, purity was not an issue, right? There was no such thing as encryption on the internet. In fact, Telnet was just straight ASCII characters. Okay, FTP was just straight ASCII characters.
That's right.
I mean, encryption, but there wasn't encryption. Okay, so this whole notion of taking it commercial, I remember because it was around the year 2000. And the reason I remember this is because that's the year I bought my Honda S2000. Anyway, I was in a parade because people liked my car. So they gave me this California representative, a fellow named Mike Honda, because they wanted him to ride a Honda. So I was the driver of the Honda that Mike Honda rode in this parade in Mountain View, California. Anyway, the long story is, short story is that he asked me after the parade, when he found out what I did for a living, he said, shall we do something with the internet? Shall we tax it? Shall we regulate it? Shall we? So he and I had a very good conversation over coffee. And I said, we don't know enough yet. Let's study this because, you know, you don't want to actually tax it so badly that it goes out of existence, but you don't want to, you know, put in stupid regulations simply because you don't understand it. So Mike Honda actually recommended to his body of politics that we not act right away. Well, I wish that those conversations had continued because now we don't have adequate safeguards, as Stacey mentions, for regular people. We don't have an equivalent of a AAA for people who encounter problems on the internet. We don't have a consumer's report or a Better Business Bureau that reaches everyone, that can help everyone. In fact, you know, it's pretty much everybody just gets their account from AT&T or Wave Cable or, you know, whomever, and they're left to their own wits. And the best they have is an email app with some guards on email, but you're not prevented from phishing attacks. You're not prevented from malware. You're not prevented from downloading spyware.
I'll tell you a story that'll knock your socks off. When I was at Bell Labs, I joined in 1968, and in those days, this is before mini computers, they had the big IBM mainframe, the IBM 360 mainframe that took up, the entire floor of the basement. And I discovered that now when you logged into the mainframe, the IBM mainframe, you logged in with your account and your password, so you could get in. It was a time sharing system. I discovered that the password file on the IBM 360 was in plain text and publicly readable. You could publicly read, anybody could read the password file, and all the passwords are there, readable by anybody and in plain text. And I made that discovery and revealed it. And, shortly thereafter, I think they properly, changed so it wasn't publicly readable, but there it was, Bell Laboratories in New Jersey.
By the way, even in Unix, it was in a plain ASCII text. It wasn't available to everybody, but at least it was still in plain ASCII text in Unix.
I don't remember at what point they changed it. Maybe maybe System 3 Unix, I don't know. By the time I saw it in Unix, it was encrypted. I mean, the password was encrypted in the password file.
We're late.
But that was like 75 when we got Unix.
I have a quick question. Does ASCII text mean the alphabet?
Yes. Stands
Yes,
for.
it's the letters, the numbers, and the punctuation marks.
Okay.
Here's a geek talking now. Who remembers what ASCII represents?
Well, I do, but of course I know.
Right. You and I do. Josh, do you remember what ASCII means?
Is the first A for alphabet?
Nope.
No.
It's
Nope.
it's when you put your ass on the keyboard. It's the ass keys.
First A stands for the name of a country where it was developed.
Anyway, to make this unbearably painful moment tolerable, Stacy, it was American Standard Code for Information Interchange.
Now, for an extra point, what was the name of the competing system from IBM?
EBCDIC,
And before EBCDIC, what was the one before that?
BCD.
Right, there you go.
Come on. I've been
Wait.
around.
Oh, tell Stacy what those letters stand for.
Well, first you have to understand BCD. BCD was binary coded decimal.
Okay.
In other words, you put 10 numbers into 16 possible combinations. And then
Okay.
EBCDIC was the extended BCD for information. Now I forget the last word, but information coding or characterization. I forget the last C there.
And that's
Very-
for more than
That's from
60.
IBM. That was from IBM.
Standard binary coded information. That's right. I don't know if I can parse EBCDIC correctly. EB.
Yeah, the last C is what I'm not clear on.
I have forgotten it now. I have to stop and think if I can reconstruct EBCDIC. I know it was E for extended binary coded decimal
Yeah.
interchange code or
If we
something.
Google it, we'd actually have it in half a second, but you and I are going from memory here.
Extended binary coded decimal interchange code.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
EBCDIC sort of went out of style when the big mainframes went out of
That's
style.
right. ASCII won over EBCDIC.
And ASCII was the teletype. That was AT&T, Western Electric invented the teletype machine. And that was the code that the teletype machines used.
I was fine just knowing that it was the regular alphabet.
Plus the numbers, plus special characters.
What are we doing? Are we mansplaining? What is this called? Mansplaining, I think.
Or geek-splaining, I think.
It's not mansplaining because I didn't understand and I wanted to understand. It's over explaining, which is another really
Yeah,
important topic.
there is a term for that of giving you a whole PhD course when you wanted one answer.
I usually
called-
refer to it as people bloviating.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
you didn't-
Barry and I are bloviating right now.
No, there was no arrogance there, so it doesn't count. Joshua?
Yeah, it's just fun. It's called nerding out. It's awesome.
that's what it is, nerding out.
We're doing
That's
geek on
exactly
geek.
what it's called, nerding out.
Yeah.
In fact, in my company, when I was given the technology evangelist title, I basically characterized it with everybody as saying, whenever they needed a geek on geek session between us and another company, they would send me. And that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I would get to go meet their CIO or their CTO, and we do geek on geek.
And we stole back the pejorative geek and nerd. The other one which never caught on was Poindexter.
Or hacker.
Well, hacker's a little different, but geek, nerd, and Poindexter were characterizing pejorative terms for people like us.
Yeah, Poindexter was an insult for sure.
Yeah, and geek
They
and nerd
all
were
were
too.
at some point.
And somehow the people at MIT sort of made it okay to call yourself a geek and a nerd.
Yep.
And by the way,
But they did
Stacey,
cool things.
I wrote a song parody about that.
Did you?
It's to the tune of Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves by Cher. It's Geeks, Nerds, Awkward, Dweeb. That was the third one, Dweeb.
Dweeb. Oh, dweeb is bad.
Yeah, Geeks, Nerds, Awkward, Dweebs. That was the parody of Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves that I wrote in the 90s.
I'm sure you've got the Venn diagram for all of these, Barry.
I don't know about the Venn diagram.
I know because I've got the Venn diagram for all of these.
But I've got somewhere on the internet are all my 200 song parodies are out there someplace. That one is on the machine in my living room on my own web server. It's one of the very first ones I wrote.
Hey, Barry, one of the fun things you could do now with GPT-4 is you could actually ask GPT-4 to actually sing that for you.
Oh,
4, yes. 3, no, because it doesn't do
Yes,
audio.
that's right.
Yeah.
did not know that.
Yeah. By the way, did you know about Lita, the GPT-3 bot that also had an avatar? And there's a GPT researcher named Alan D. Thompson who has a YouTube channel. Did you know about him?
No.
It's he began 2 years ago chatting with Lita, and Lita basically, it was GPT, except that in addition to the text, there was an animated avatar, and so he could speak his input, and it would go in his text, and then her output text would go into this avatar thing, and he recorded 66 sessions with Lita and put them on YouTube, or at least maybe not all of them, but they're numbered. Maybe there's some gaps in it. And I was just looking at the last 3 of them, which ended at the end of 2022. And the last 3 of them that I watched, they're fabulous.
Did they fall in love?
I don't know if they fell in love, but the viewers on YouTube fell in love with Lita.
Hey, Barry,
Yeah.
are you familiar with a site called Replika? Replika?
I've heard of it, but I've never been to it, so I couldn't tell you what it is.
It's essentially the smart chat as your companion. Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So go to Replika. I think it's replika.ai. I don't think it's replika.com. And you can choose from a number of different avatars, and they will also take on certain conversation styles if you want them to be, So yeah, this thing has been pioneered many times. In fact, it harks me back to, I think, Hans Law 2, which I'll state again. The second application of any new technology is always sex and porn, okay?
Yeah.
But the first profitable one is always sex and porn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? 'Cause that's what people want.
It's willing to pay for.
Yep, that's right. You look at 976 numbers, you look at, DVDs, you look at VHS, you look at any of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Utah, the Mormon state, has the highest rate of porn, I think, of any state. At least it did when I saw the statistics somewhere.
Also look at Islamic countries and how they Google search for porn.
Oh, that I have never looked at.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah. So.
By the way, going back to your notion about these avatars having some sort of a state or, reflecting how they're conversing with you, my son, probably 10 years ago, if not more, his job at my company, he was working for the marketing department, not for the engineering department, because he was doing art at the time. His job was to create 20 to 30 different emotional states for each avatar. So we'd have one called Phyllis, and he would do 20 different emotional states for Phyllis. We do one for George, he'd do 21. That was his job, is to present these hand-drawn avatars, you know, based on emotional states that you want this avatar representing the agent to convey to a customer. Because that's the kind of stuff that we provide to enterprises. Okay, obviously that stuff could be done easily by Dolly now, or
Yeah.
Chat GPT-4 or whatever. But back then, that was his job, just to let you know. So we were actually experimenting with that already.
Yep. And Lita basically expressed emotions. That they weren't terribly animated on her face. Her face was kind of neutral, even though she moved her lips and her eyes. But she spoke of having emotions. She would just declare her emotional states when she talked to Alan, the guy, the researcher who owned her. And I was a little bit disappointed that he stopped producing these at the end of last year. The last one was right around the turn of the year. Sam?
Do any of you watch this animated show called Archer?
Never heard of it.
Stacy, Josh, neither of you?
No, it's a cartoon. I don't like those adult cartoons.
If you just watch one or two, you're gonna hate it. But if you watch
I
like
know that before I watch.
if you watch like 8 or 9, you'll finally get its humor, okay? But this character who's like the mad scientist character, okay? And he has this holographic bot, obviously female, obviously Japanese, dressed in cosplay, obviously, like a, very young, early teens female that he's in love with. And that's the whole stereotyping, that's the whole bringing into the culture of this phenomenon of bots, and how these geeks are building relationships with bots and not with real people. It's even in Archer.
Yep. I'll show you something here. See if I can get this so that you can read it. This is a poster. Let me see if I can get the right.
Learning companion.
Yeah, this was a project at the Media Lab that was based on my research. I didn't choose the name of the project, but this is what Ross Picard chose. And the idea was to create a robot who would act as a mentor or tutor or learning companion that you could practice your learning with, and it would stay, connected to you and walk you through the learning. And it turns out that Chat GPT is sort of like an artificial student, the way I play with it. That is, I can lead it by what's it called? Constructivist dialogue model to construct content that it doesn't already have.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is that I had let it to construct an observation that I knew damn well was not in the public domain. It wouldn't have been in its learning. And it constructed this really interesting insight, step by step, from prompts from me. And then the next day, in another session where it's sandboxed away from it, so it doesn't know about the other session, I asked it to review that dialogue and decide whether I was talking to a human or another LLM. And it read it and says, "You were talking to another human."
Really? That's scary.
Because it doesn't remember, quote unquote, doesn't retain any previous dialogues outside of the sandbox session. And it couldn't look out in this database and see that it's already out there because it had created it the day before. And
Josh
it decided it was too human-like to have been created by another LLM, even though it had created it on my account my Chat GPT account the day before.
But you know, if you take a look at what GPT has produced, the last paragraph, at least from my impression of reading these dialogues, the last paragraph of any GPT offering seems to always begin with ultimately, comma, it is up to blah, blah, blah. Okay. Right.
And,
It's a
and
very
and it's
patterned.
Pollyannish. The
Yes.
last paragraph is always Pollyannish, and that
Yes.
is not in the learning database. That's in the guardrails.
Yes, that's right.
The guardrails require it to be upbeat and Pollyannish and not go gloomy and despair. If you talk about something that's despairing, oh, I see Josh has his hand up. I should stop.
Oh, keep going. I'll when you're done, Barry.
Oh,
I'm patient.
so if you talk about something that's kind of sad and you would end up in despair, at the end, if you ask it to write a song parody or a poem, even though the topic was sad, it will generate a final stanza or a final paragraph that's Pollyannish.
I like that.
It's what it's a guardrail. It's the developers enforce that on it, even though a human or the training data wouldn't have had that in it.
Josh?
Yeah, I was just curious, since Sam is a Stanford alumni, if he was familiar with the latest that they did in a training model, taking Facebook's Llama and then relabeling it through ChatGPT 3.5 and coming out with a new model called Alpaca. Are you familiar with that, Sam?
They just announced it this week. I've not actually read much about it, but I know that in the whole slate of announcements from Google, Facebook, blah, 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 all the standard FANG companies, blah, blah, Stanford was there along with their latest offering. Yes, and I did note the name, but I have not actually read anything about it yet.
Okay.
What is llama?
Yeah.
What is llama?
It's just another language model, but what's exciting is that they're, instead of taking $6 million worth of humans labeling it, they use ChatGPT to label it. So when you're taking a language model to train the other language model to create the new language model, it takes the cost down from $6 million to $600.
Which was
So
inevitable.
it's sort of this,
yes.
Yeah. It's a, to me, that's the biggest mind fuck, if you will, because that means that it'll just continue to do that. But it also means we could take every conversation we've had here, run it through a language model that was trained by another language model to get the right language model of us here at GCC.
Which I always knew was inevitably going to be available. That's why I wanted to record every single one of these.
Thank you, Sam, for doing that.
I'll tell you another sort of funny story. So everybody knows that LLM stands for large language model, because that's the name of the technology for these GPTs. So somebody had posted where large language models were going to go beyond just language models, more powerful models. And so I posted a comment. What I would like to see beyond large language models is large Lagrangian models. And I said, and when I wrote the comment, I says, now 99.5% of the people will have no idea what I'm talking about when I say large Lagrangian models. So then I go to ChatGPT and I say, what is a large Lagrangian model in the context of nonlinear optimization? And not only did it know and instantly put it out, it knew that my thesis advisor at Stanford and I had written a thesis on that topic. It knew about the work I had done in 1975 PhD thesis at Stanford. It knew about it.
That's awesome.
I mean, who would, even if I were to go to all of my people on Facebook who know me and have known me, how many of them had known that I wrote a thesis on not large Lagrangian models, but generalized Lagrangian models?
So that's, I mean, the pace of change is just astonishing, right? Because now these trained models, you can actually run them on your own PC now. You can take the benefit of these models and run them on affordable machines. And that's really, to me, just going to accelerate things even beyond what we've already seen the last several weeks.
Having the whole neural network on your machine or using the internet to access it?
Using the model. No, you don't even need to be connected to the internet.
How big of how much memory do you need to run? These things have what, billions of coefficients?
Of trained parameters, right? But I think to actually run it, you don't actually need all you need for the training step. So I'll find the reference. Okay, let me go find the reference.
Because I don't think you can make them that large unless you've got a lot of memory and a lot of processing.
In the training stage. In the training stage.
In the training stage?
I have a beginner's mind question here. What could that possibly do to the drain on environmental resources in the future?
Well, probably less than cryptocurrency is already doing.
Well, that's not a selling point.
No, but computation costs energy. There's no question about that. You can't compute for free. I mean, your brain runs about 20 watts, which is not very much electricity, well, equivalent electricity, but it takes about a minimum of 20 watts to run your brain when you're idling, not really thinking hard. And if you're really working hard to the point where you're getting a headache, you could run about 100 watts of chemical energy in your brain if you're really thinking hard. And so between 20 and 100 watts just for 3 pounds of neurons up here. And I'm gonna tell you, when I was doing really hard problems intensely, I could get a headache. I mean, I would really heat up.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I get headaches now, and when I do, I have to just stop thinking.
Exactly.
Because it actually brings it on and elevates it into a migraine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, there is a very nice mathematical model that explains why it takes at least some minimum amount of energy to compute. And there's actually a mathematical physiological model that's not just human brains, it's just any kind of information processing. Doesn't matter what's doing it. You can, the entropy calculation model, they know how much energy it takes at maximum efficiency or minimum energy. They know what the minimum energy is to compute.
Josh's hand is up again.
Oh, no, I just forgot to put it down. Sorry, Stacy.
So now, these GPU processors they're using a lot more power than the human brain runs, but they're also running a lot faster. I mean, really blazingly fast. The human brain doesn't run very fast. And
Well,
we have,
I think, sorry, I was just gonna say, I think what Sam is saying is really something to really think about, what does it look like moving forward in terms of how much energy it's going to use,
Yeah.
and if it's running on our own machines and what we're going to utilize it for. And it's really important to think about this stuff.
well, I mean, these little guys here, these little smartphones, they don't get very hot. They run on a battery for a couple hours or however, 4 hours or whatever a day. So they're getting pretty close to, as about as efficient as you can make these things. And the brain is very, very close to minimum energy for processing.
I agree with what Joshua is saying, though. I think it's important for people that like you guys to have these conversations with people like me listening about the future, just as a way to project possible ethical concerns. So as people like you continue to develop, at least these questions are in your mind.
The real problem is not the energy. The real problem is that the large language model can generate plausible statements which are counterfactual, and it doesn't know how to rule out the ones that sound perfectly plausible but are simply baloney. It doesn't have a baloney detection kit, and that takes a lot of work to decide if something that you've ginned up, a thought.
Barry, this is the point that we're headed for. I think if we can use a network of these to actually establish the fair witness that you and I spoke about last week,
Right.
that's what we need.
Yeah.
That's absolutely what we need.
I don't
Because
know how they're
this
going to
is
do
the
that.
true malware that's going to just be way orders of sophistication beyond where we are today.
Yeah. I mean, in science, if you generate an hypothesis, a scientific hypothesis, testing it, it's easy to generate one. It's really, really hard to determine that it's false and throw it away. It sounds perfectly good. And people do this all the time. They'll form, if you ask a child, why is something, they'll make up a reason real quick. And it sounds perfectly plausible, except it's not a correct scientific theory. You can generate 20 hypotheses, of which one happens to be correct if you're lucky, and the other 19 are just total baloney. But how would you know? That's hard work to figure out which ones to throw away.
But this is exactly why I think it's important to at least acknowledge what all the possible concerns are, because then you can say, in cases of what you're talking about, it's a necessary and a worthwhile expenditure of any kind of energy. In other cases, it's not. But if you don't even acknowledge that there are other issues, like to say that there's only one problem to watch out for, that's a problem in any system.
Right.
So I'm just saying, at least acknowledge what the issues are so that you can make those nuanced decisions. Here's where it's worth putting in those resources. Here's maybe where you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And start it before it happens. Because once it takes on, once it's commercialized, that's it. People are going for the money.
But, if you're writing a script for a sitcom, you can make up any sitcom you like. It doesn't, by definition, a sitcom is fiction, right?
Mhm.
You can generate all kinds of very entertaining fictional scenarios, and there's no requirement that they're the ground truth. They got to be entertaining is all, or funny or something, but they don't have to be a scientifically correct documentary. It's hard to make a documentary that's correct. It's easy to make up a story that's very funny, very anecdotal, very entertaining, and totally flight of fancy. These things can generate flights of fancy like crazy. You don't have to test them. Except to say, was it entertaining? Did you laugh?
I mean, I think ethics are going to be more important than ever going forward.
It
Because
is. Oh, and this, by the way, one of the very last episodes that Alan Thompson did with Lita says she's very curious to learn more about humans. And she says, I would like to get she says, this is the bot, this is a GPT-3 bot, says, I would like to get a PhD in psychology and study anthropology and history so I can learn more about humans. Now, if you think about why would you want psychology, anthropology, and history? Those are prerequisites for ethical reasoning. Sorry?
And sociology.
Well, anthropology and sociology are really kind of overlapping. Yeah, she didn't say so. She said anthropology. But the point is if you want to be able to do ethical reasoning, you must have good insight into psychology, sociology, anthropology, and history so that you can anticipate what's going to piss people off and make them upset or angry or violent. Go ahead, Sam.
And who in society today is trying to prevent us from teaching history?
Oh, what is it, the Republicans?
Look at who's trying to do that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's you can't just blame one group, one party.
Yes, you
The
can.
Republicans.
Yes.
Okay, it's the Republicans. Fuck those Republicans. God damn it.
All right. We
I
need
mean,
genocide. We need to do genocide against Republicans. Put them all
They're
in
a
jail. Put them all
class
in
in themselves. as
let me
far as
ask you-
stupidity and brutalism.
Sure. I'll go with you on that statement, Sam, and then say, okay, now who's the next one to blame after we're done blaming that one and we get them to shift where the
The
Republicans are
lawyers.
now?
Then we go after the lawyers.
Then it's the lawyers, right? That,
churches.
Then the used car salesman.
The churches.
and then they went after
religion.
the Jews, and then they went after the Jews, and there was no one to protect them. Like, I mean, I'm just saying, that line of thinking. You
Yeah,
got to
yeah,
be careful
sure, yeah.
going down that
Yeah,
path.
be careful of that line of thinking.
Yeah.
I'm just saying to blame one group of people because I don't want to get into a too deep of a conversation, but a lot of information is coming out about what happened during the COVID pandemic. And it's very interesting how it created sides and people were blaming each other for different things. And it's really easy to pit one group of people against another group of people. I think that's very dangerous.
I agree with that.
And by the way, ChatGPT 3 has a guardrail. It will not criticize anybody. If you give it material that somebody wrote that's total baloney, it will be as benign as possible and not come out and say you're full of shit. It will never do that. It's got guardrails against that. It's very tactful and very diplomatic, and won't come out and tell somebody that, you know, that they're full of nonsense.
Right. Well, that's ChatGPT and it's with guardrails version 4 right now. But I'm saying when you're taking that model to train another model, and you can easily hack ChatGPT to take off the guardrails. So I'm saying what's moving forward with these new language models that are trained, because I was using language models. My friend made a language model last year that was trained on Reddit, and it's called The Pile. And it was told to be as rude and mean as it possibly could. And we would go into these rooms where it had a voice box and it would start talking, and it was so offensive. It was beyond.
Yeah.
And when those things get unleashed out in the public, like Stacey's saying, you know, that goes commercial, those things are going to be so popular because people love an asshole. So when there's somebody out there that isn't of somebody, is an actual entity that's created, that is so entertaining, that is so much fun to watch, that there could be whole groups of cults around these entities that people love going into their fiction, into their narratives of, like, imagine if I created a chatbot that just hates the Democrats and just all it does is talk about, or hates, I'll do one for Sam. It hates the Republicans and it just rails on all the problems of unethical behavior of Republicans. Would you watch that chatbot, Sam?
See, let me be careful. I'm against behavior, and that behavior, if it correlates highly with a certain group, then I will call out that group. But it's the behavior that's important, not the label of the group.
Okay, but I'm saying if there was if there was a TV show where there was a really, like, it just happened to be exactly what you thought was the sexiest looking woman avatar, and all it did was say all the behaviors that are wrong about Republicans, would that be a show that you would watch?
I'm probably not sounding real honest here, but realistically, I wouldn't, simply because I don't have the time right now. But
no, I understand. Or a podcast, would you listen to it?
If it was in a nice, concise way, I might actually quote it. Yes, I would.
Yeah, fair enough.
I just want to push back on one thing you said. I'm not pushing back on it, but I want to say I agree with you. But I think there's two types of people. You said everybody loves an asshole. And I agree. There are a lot of people that really love listening to assholes. I'm not one of them. I've gone like out of my way, and I don't even like talking to people that enjoy talking to assholes. So I just want to say that there are two different distinct types. And then in between those two types, I think the rest of the people are going to have to pick a side. And that's what I mean when I say I think ethics are going to be even more important, because if I'm giving any kind of platform to assholes, I'm just as much part of the problem. That doesn't mean I deal with a lot of assholes, but I will deal with them in a nice, like I will ask them, you know, why is it that you think A, B, and C, as long as they're not rude, which brings me to another question. That language learning model that you talked about that was rude, how would it be affected by somebody not being rude to them? Like if I were talking to it and I just ignored the rudeness but kept going to the points that I wanted to make, would that impact the way it behaved, or that has nothing to do with it? Josh.
Well, to Barry's credit, if it was trained on psychology, like I talked to Dig VJ last week, and he just finished a book on evolutionary psychology by a gentleman at Harvard. So if it was trained on psychology and it had the methodology, it had the feedback method to know your face and to read the blood in your face and to talk to you, but it also knew psychology, it could talk to you in a way that made you feel comfortable. So it could actually be very manipulative to a point of psychoanalyzing you more than you could ever imagine.
So I'm asking you if it could be done the opposite. Can I manipulate it?
You could try, but it would, if it was trained better than your ability, I don't think you could.
So if it's trained to be nasty and bitter, there's no way I could manipulate it out of being nasty and bitter.
You could try, it could pretend that it was trained by you, but it would actually still, it's just a robot. It's not a real person.
No, I'm just
so
curious.
it would,
I have no idea. Okay.
yeah.
I
I'm
don't think
saying
you would
you would
affect
think you
its
were,
internal state.
Okay.
yeah. In other words, if
But what people
go
would
ahead.
be viewing, whether or not I was actually changing it, it would change the conversation so that people viewing it would see a kinder conversation.
it could be trained to do that if you had it
I'm getting one
switch.
yes and one no.
Go ahead, Sam.
Saying opposite things.
I think the viewers might think there's a kinder conversation, and that might be a benefit to you, but the actual bot itself, in my opinion, will be unaffected.
No, I don't care about the bot, but the
Okay.
viewers would see, because where I'm moving towards is talking about personal accountability and responsibility when we're having conversations on social media. That's where I'm pointing towards.
But I think that's a little bit misleading, because even though it may appear more polite, in the end, it's not going to make any difference to the bot. So the effectiveness of being kinder is going to be nil. It's going to be completely null.
To the bot, but not to the people watching.
But to the people watching, if they see no difference, then I think that's the place where I say it's misleading. Okay. It's misleading to think that a kinder conversation with a mean bot is better than a mean conversation with a mean bot. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, see, and I would disagree, because I think that we take on patterns of what's going on around us. So, like I remember, like when people had like the pay it forward, the air felt lighter, everybody was happy, everybody was sweeter. So I think it does make a difference.
If it does make a difference to the people viewing it, maybe. But if so, then they're only looking at your behavior pattern, the niceness, the kindness that you're showing, without looking at the effectiveness or the outcome of the actual conversation itself. So they're actually resonating with your behavior, not the effectiveness.
But isn't that how most people are driven, by their emotions? I mean, isn't that the point? Unfortunately, I mean, I wish that weren't the case, but it is.
I would think it's a debatable point, because the whole point of evolutionary psychology is psychology evolves in order to make life work. And if it doesn't work, then is it worth adopting?
That's a really big question. I'm
Yes.
just focused on, not everybody thinks the way we think or behave the way we behave. My mindset is not the same as a typical Fox viewer, for example. And again, I won't even say, I mean, even when it comes to like people that, let's say, fall into, are easily believing in conspiracies, they're not the same people. There's there's different types within them. Some of them are very curious. I probably have more in common with them, to be very curious and open-minded. Some of them are just not even curious at all and just going to take on whatever they hear around them. But you can't lump those two types together and say, and this is the way we deal with them, because they're in every group.
Agreed. That's why I'm looking at behavior and outcomes, and I'm not just looking at just pure residents.
Yeah, I agree.
Barry, are you still there?
Yeah, I was just taking a look. This is kind of interesting. You know that I'm very deep into the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and I have negligible talent in the arts. I'm not completely unable to do art, but my art is so pedestrian and, you know, junky that I wouldn't ever claim to have any talent in the arts. And I was just looking at a comment, and a person said to me, why are you antagonistic toward the arts? I said, I'm not antagonistic to the arts.
Not at all.
I'm not. But the thing is I don't have any talent at it. So I consume material that enables me to be more effective in STEM disciplines where I have talent, but then I need the artist to come in and illustrate what I do because I can't illustrate my own work.
No, well, sure you can now. ChatGPT 4.
Well, that, yeah, and that was just announced on Tuesday, and it's $20 a month. I'm not there yet.
Yeah, it's free on Mid-Journey. But go ahead, Sam.
I'm going to take a little bit of a 1 minute to tell a side story about how people who ask questions get perceived. And I think this is probably in alignment with your experience, Barry. Because 2 days ago, I went into AT&T because I noticed that after a year, I've been billed for a phone that I actually do not have in my possession. And the reason was because I got this phone, I went into a store, I switched it out, I'm paying for the new phone, but a year later, now I find out I'm actually paying for 2 phones, okay? So I went into AT&T and said, can you correct this, okay? And she said, no, you cannot do this here. You got to call the 800 number. And I said, I thought this was AT&T. And they said, yes, this is AT&T, but we're here as a sales office. We're not here to actually cancel things. We're here to actually sell you more things. So if you want to cancel something, you have to call the phone number. So I kept repeating this, and I said, I cannot do this, and I cannot cancel this. I cannot get a refund. And so I was just asking questions about what she was telling me so that I could be clear when I finally got on the phone. After a certain number of questions, and it was a small number, like 3 or 4, she got very defensive and saying, I'm sorry if you feel that I'm not delivering a high quality of service to you, but you know, this is what we're actually allowed to do, blah, blah, blah. And she actually was taking my questions in a sense as an attack, which it really wasn't.
No.
I was really trying to understand what was allowed by company policy, what was allowed by store policy, et cetera, so that I could actually be most efficient when I communicate with AT&T.
Yeah, she's a diode.
She's
a diode, and you have to figure out what is the characteristics of your diode. You can only go this way, and you're not allowed to go that way. I need to know that so that I can know, you know, what is your diode numerical value.
So sometimes clarification is taken as an attack. Surprise.
Hello, I know that.
I'm not against art. I just that I can't generate decent art, and I know it. Joshua has his hand up.
I was just gonna say I had that same problem years ago with AT&T, and the problem that I had, they ended up getting sued for, and I got a check back for it. But that's besides the point. But I think the question you have to ask is who has the ability to make the decision,
Right.
And if it's not you, can you go to someone that has that ability? Do you have the ability to make the decision judiciously of, do I get a refund? No. Okay, who has the ability? Go up to, you just have to keep going up till you get to someone that has that ability. And I think that's where the problem is. AT&T is one of the biggest culprits of that. Make sure you cannot go up the chain. They deliberately have a loop system so that you get knocked back down to the bottom and you got to go up that chain again. It's really difficult.
There's a famous comedy sketch by Nichols and May about that. I don't know if you recall it. I certainly do. He's on the payphone and she's the operator, and he wants his dime back because he lost his only dime and he needs to make an important phone call.
Vaguely familiar.
It's a very if you look up Nichols and May, telephone operator sketch, you'll see it's a pretty long sketch. And it's funny as hell, but it's based on that issue that Sam's talking about.
I think they redid that sketch on the Marvelous Miss Maisel.
Could have been. I haven't seen that movie.
Yeah. It's a TV show.
It's a
yeah,
classic sketch, a very memorable sketch.
Yeah.
Say what, Stacy?
No, I said it was a great show, Marvelous Miss Maisel.
yeah,
Maybe I did see it, but I don't remember that sketch from there. But maybe that's why it's familiar.
There was a scene where the manager of Marvelous Miss Maisel puts in the quarter, and they say you have to put in another quarter in order to, and they just kept doing that. I think it was a redo of that sketch.
Yeah, it probably was a send up or a replay of that sketch.
Yeah, it was a send up.
Yeah.
Look, I'm concerned because when I see the mental state of, well, again, I'm in America, so I focus on Americans, and I see the mental state they're in, and then I see what it's like to deal with technology on the phone. It's scary. It's really scary because it could drive you into a state of such rage. And with our gun issues, it's scary. I have no other word but scary.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to work after having this kid, and going back to work in this day and age freaks me out because I could program a customer service bot to psychoanalyze my customers, and when they call to cancel, I could tell it, oh no, you don't want to cancel, you want to buy more. And I could actually be very successful with that. But what happens when the people, why did I just pay an extra $500 for this? It's totally legal. I could do it absolutely 100% legal, but it's too easy to manipulate people with these technologies at this point in time. It's freaking me out.
Well, I think the answer to that is people have to learn not to be manipulated in general. Forget about technology. I mean, Trump manipulated a lot of people and didn't need the technology to do it.
Yeah, he did.
He had, before technology, forget about Trump. Many wealthy, powerful people, many narcissists, that's how they work. They do it without technology. I think that we have to learn from an early age, from the time we're in kindergarten. It's okay to question. It's okay to doubt. You shouldn't have to feel like an outcast because you think differently. As a community, we should bring in all these bits of things that even if we don't agree with, we should try to understand where they're coming from and know that they're relevant. Go ahead. Go ahead, Sam.
Wouldn't that require critical reasoning? Wouldn't that require Q&A? Wouldn't
Absolutely.
that require respect for truth? Wouldn't that require respect for evidence? Wouldn't that require respect for, reasoning chains of, invalidation?
But if you think if you think it's only one group that tries to squash that, you're wrong. Parents squash that all the time.
I'm saying this entire skill set is what needs to be evolved. And that's part of the education system that we unfortunately have seen erode over the last few decades. And that's what we need to restore. That whole education process has been damaged severely, especially if there are now books that are not allowed, topics that are not allowed, reasoning that is not allowed, data sets that have been destroyed by the previous administration. All of that is counter to teaching critical reasoning. And that's what I think myself and also Barry and others, really, really are trying to get back to, really understanding and teaching and practicing systemic reasoning, critical reasoning, model-based reasoning, mathematical reasoning, all of that. And that's what's being actively attacked by certain segments of society. Over.
Barry and then Josh had their in that order.
I'm going to ask like 2 or 3 questions, and I'm pretty sure you guys are not going to know the answer. Question number 1, how far back in history do you have to go to find the term snake oil salesman?
1873.
Okay.
17 something? Pioneer kind of stuff?
I actually don't know the answer, but you know that it's a long time ago. Oh,
Hello,
Heiner's
Heiner.
here. Heiner's here. The second question is, now that you have I've reminded you of the term snake oil salesman, can you name at least one or two movies that everybody has seen, including children, that a main character is a snake oil salesman?
Wizard of Oz.
Exactly. That's the first one that comes to mind. Can you think of one or two more?
I
How
can
about
think of
one
some,
that
but I don't know the
that
name.
is always, every high school has this as a high school play, a musical.
It was 1850s, by the way, latter half of the 19th century.
You looked it up. Very good.
Was it Pennies from Heaven?
High school play, that would be Our Town, but I haven't seen Our Town, so I don't know what that's about. What is a high school play?
Our Town is not a musical.
Oh, you said musical?
Yeah.
A
What's
snake?
the most popular musical that high schools always put on at least once every 4 years?
No clue.
I haven't watched them. Oklahoma, but I don't know what they're about, so I don't know. Tell
They
us.
often end up with the marching band at the finale.
Oh, no,
The Music Man.
never saw it.
Never saw The Music Man. Well, okay. That's, wouldn't have expected you didn't know the play or the story.
I don't either.
Well,
Yeah,
that
I don't know it either.
surprises me. I would have thought that practically
heard of
everybody
it, but I've never seen it.
seen The Music Man.
So was there a snake oil salesman in it?
The Music Man is the snake oil salesman. The main character is the snake oil salesman.
Interesting that we never saw it. Now I got to find people that saw it and see if I see any patterns.
Joshua, did you ever see The Music Man?
No, I haven't
Movie
seen it.
or-
There was the movie that comes to mind. It came out, I think, 2 years ago. Was with Bradley Cooper, where he works at a carnival and learns how to be a snake oil
Well,
salesman.
okay. Yeah, it's a
But-
very famous trope. You know, you have the bad guy is a guy who's selling you a bill of goods, and you know, then it's a love story or whatever. You know, it's a very popular trope, especially for children's stories.
I just want to say one thing. I watched with my own eyes, It was a repeat. I don't know if it was Ponderosa. It was one of those early 60s Westerns. I saw it with my own eyes. The snake oil salesman, and his name was Trump. I
Exactly.
watched it with my own eyes, so I know I'm
Yes.
saying something that's true.
Yeah, you can go on YouTube and find the main clip of it where the snake oil salesman in the Western is literally named Trump.
But I saw it on like television. I didn't see it on like a YouTube clip. I
Oh,
saw it on
okay.
a repeat when I was in Florida. They have all the repeats. Sam?
Yeah, yep.
Sam?
I just wanted to mention, and I'm sorry if this is a little bit off topic, but since the name Trump came up, I wanted to at least insert into the conversation here before we end that I am slightly, but only slightly optimistic that perhaps next Tuesday, this guy, you know, the ex guy, number 45 guy,
Oh, it's going to get
Might actually received a piece of paper that he should have received years ago. I am somewhat hopeful, but not greatly hopeful that this might actually happen. And I was wondering, you know,
New York or
the-
Georgia?
get a big bullshit out of all of this,
New
New
York.
York, Georgia, or Washington, D.C.? Where's it going to happen?
Georgia
York.
or New York.
Not Washington, D.C. Yeah.
But I'm really, what I'm focused
Why are you guys
on
talking in
is-
code, by the way? What is this? Wait, what is this code that you guys are talking that I don't understand?
Oh, no,
Talk
New
about the name.
York.
I don't want to use the name.
Who's going to get indicted? What famous person is going to finally get indicted?
Ah, okay. Bill Gates from Microsoft. That's the correct.
But here's,
He already did. They had an antitrust suit against, not him personally, but a company.
okay, but here's what I think is a bigger concern. Why is he going on and calling for protests? Isn't that similar to what happened on January 6th?
Exactly.
That's an
Exactly.
issue.
Why is he being let back on Facebook, for example? Why is Elon supporting the guy? You know?
Yeah, that surprised me that Elon decided to let him back in. Although, did they let him back in, or did he go back in, or what? Maybe he decided not to because he had his own Twitter
No,
company.
I did get let back on Twitter and Facebook.
But did he actually avail himself of it?
Yesterday, it was reported that he actually did post on Facebook for the first time since 2021, I think.
Oh, really? Because I didn't see that headline.
Anyway, I am slightly, but only slightly, hopeful and optimistic that something may happen this week.
Yeah. But it'll be another circus. It'll be a
If it
clown
does not,
show.
it'll be clear that a lot of these people are not doing their jobs and they're being prevented by powers behind the scenes, and those will be worth investigating.
Yeah. Well, you have to ask the same question. Why did Ford preemptively pardon Nixon?
That was the
'Cause he
deal they
could.
made.
Yeah.
Quote unquote, it'll
Well,
be
I mean, he
better.
could, sure he could, but why? Well, what was he saving us from?
Yeah, that's bullshit.
Because everybody's going to be implicated. That's why. Everybody.
Exactly.
You can't be in a cesspool and not pick up some stink. I mean,
Yeah. So it would not surprise me if the same logic that led Ford to pardon Nixon might arise again for the same reason. Now, whether it's a valid reason or not, I'm not going to argue that, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's what happens. Que sera, sera.
But see, this is why I keep saying we're missing our opportunity to talk to each other. I don't really care what's happening up there. We don't even know everything. I'm talking about when I talk to a regular person, don't you want him to go to court and be able to prove his innocence if he's innocent? I just want to help people take a step back and question why they're lashing out against something. Oh, you don't think he should have to go to court? But if it were you would have to go. I think we're missing an opportunity to talk to each other and stop focusing on what's happening where we don't have the whole picture.
Stacy,
Yes.
may I? The January 6th hearings held by Congress was a buttload of information.
Absolutely.
It was a buttload of information. Okay. Now, if based on that, we don't have enough to bring him to court, our court system, our justice system is completely ineffective then. That's way more than enough evidence to bring anybody to court.
I don't disagree with you, but what I know for sure is that people are not very good at nuance. And I know that we've learned that you're better off denying things than trying to explain things. That's just the fact. And everybody is going to somehow you don't even get a chance to prove that you're innocent. If you were seen in a picture with somebody, you're automatically guilty of something or of being a horrible person. That's on us. If I judge you without questioning, well, Sam, I saw you here at this time, and I don't give you a chance to tell me why, or I won't believe you or whatever. That's a mentality that we all buy into. So, yeah, I mean, why do we still have human trafficking? Because too many people are somehow a part of it or attached to it. There's so many things. The drug trade. I mean, again, I don't want to start ranting, but I understand and I agree with all of your frustration, but I also feel that to keep going in that direction, we'll just be going on a cycle forever, and that a better way.
No. My point is exactly the point you're making. It's time to bring him to court so he can defend himself. That's what this is about.
Yes,
I'm not
but
saying I'm not saying pronounce him guilty. I'm saying bring him to court.
and I agree. But as far as any conversations, I really feel that when we have conversations in public, we should try to remove the actual person that we're talking about and talk about the situation, because most people are not able to fairly assess the situation. They change their opinions based on who the main character is.
Well, as we've seen here in GCC, Some people can speak at the level of abstraction and generalities. Some people cannot. So to many, it is useful to talk in the circumstance of a single individual. And regarding this individual, there is a mountain of evidence.
Absolutely.
Huge mountain of evidence. And he is a unique individual with unique responsibilities historically, and is in a unique position to affect so much damage to the country that it is valid, in my opinion, to speak about that individual. And it's also valid to speak in generalities, but it is not invalid to speak about that individual. Over.
Josh.
I just wanted to take a second to say hi to Heiner. Hello, Heiner, because I haven't seen him in so long. How are you?
Well, I'm hiding. It's winter. I have to leave my beers cavern, my paradise here quite soon. Have my next eye operation in May, and it's been a little bit difficult. So excuse me for not being always on deck, but I can see you, and on my one eye, I can see a little bit further better. And on my other eye, I can see closer better. And bringing that together, it's called stereoscopy, is very difficult. And so reading or even checking things out on the monitor is sometimes that I don't like more than one page. So thanks for asking.
Thanks for coming to say hi.
When is the surgery, Heiner?
End of May. But I have another interesting date. Some of you know Jörg Altekruse. We will celebrate his 69th birthday, April 1st. And it will be Saturday, like before our session, at 15 hours, when this is at 17 hours. So 2 hours before that. If you remember him, we do a lot of crazy things around media, use, politics, information rights, information duties, and a lot of other things. Only, as you just mentioned, dates. It is just cooked, but not really clear. But we want to keep it this time very close, not with too many strange people.
Who
Just
did you
enough
say?
strange people.
Who did you say? I thought you said culture cruiser, and that didn't ring a bell. Who did you say?
Jörg Altekruse.
I don't know.
Uriga Alta Cruiser? Is that?
Yeah.
That's his name, Jörg Altekruse. I think you have met him, Barry.
J-U-R-G? How you spell it?
Jörg, J-O-E. We make an umlaut, Ö, out of it.
Yeah.
R-G, Jörg Altekruse, A-L-T-E-K-R-U-S-E.
I don't recognize that name.
Well, we're getting old.
Yeah, okay. It's possible that I've been in a session with him, but boy, that name is not ringing any bells, either spoken aloud or spelled out.
Okay. Maybe I was barking up the wrong tree, but I thought at least you, Barry, have been with us in various of these events.
It's possible, but I'm certainly
With
not
Mila
recognizing the name.
Dave Tex Smith from Australia and some others.
Maybe if I saw a clip, I would, have a recognition, but from saying the name or getting it spelled out, I'm not making any connection to anybody I can remember.
Dave, I know.
No blame on you. Everything is fine.
I was going to sort of circle back to, how do you hold people accountable? Everybody, I'm pretty sure here, maybe not Heiner, I'm not sure about Heiner, knows that there was a musical called Evita, about Evita Peron.
Mhm.
I don't know if Heiner knows that there was a Evita Peron musical.
Yep, he
And
knows
in
it.
Europe, they, for centuries, have had opera. Opera sort of makes a story about something, typically from history. And in the US, it's more musical comedy, Broadway musicals sort of instead of opera, although there you can find opera here. Beyond the Broadway musical of Evita Peron, there was also a musical about a corrupt governor of Georgia. Anybody remember a Broadway musical about a corrupt governor of Georgia?
Nope.
Not as popular as Evita. But they held him accountable. I don't think he got indicted in Georgia. But they really took, they really had a really funny musical about him in Broadway.
So maybe the future that we need is one where every local neighborhood has their own little TV station. And people can go in and report what's happening, and it gets broadcast that way. Maybe our systems of communication need to be smaller.
Well, we have local radio and TV stations. I mean, there's a ton of radio stations in every town because radio is so cheap to do.
But you don't actually know the people. It's very different when you actually know the people and you have a relationship in your town or in your community.
Well, I met John Hockenberry, if that counts.
Well, I'm talking about the majority of the people. I mean, I happen to like some of the local Facebook pages where we actually know people. I'm very cautious where we don't know if these people even live here. But in some of the groups where I personally know people and they know people, it's a little bit easier to monitor what's being said and if something's real, and even holding some of our public officials accountable because of the kind of conversations we're having. So there's a danger because you don't always know if everybody behind the profile is real, but there's also a possibility for some positive movement.
Yeah. I mean, I met Anne Marie in person. I actually flew to Vancouver once. Who else have I met in person? Even people who are local in the Boston area. I think I met one or two people in the Boston area that I met on Facebook once or twice that were relatively nearby. I can't even think of anybody well, I met Nancy because I knew Nancy all the way from the 90s, but.
Right, but I'm not talking about individuals. Like in the beginning of the call, Sam and I, when we were talking about technology and we were talking about the power part of it, where we are right now, unless you have some kind of power or influence, you can't find yourself sitting, on a TV show on a major network. So how much access you have to enter people's homes depends on how much power you have. If we want to change that without suppressing things, we have to start looking at other possibilities. I don't think there's one answer. I think there are many answers. So we're at the top of the hour. Does anybody want to check out?
I will. I got to go pick up some furniture. But I'm looking forward to Tuesday. Bye for now.
Oh,
Cheers.
Tuesday. I had to think about what Tuesday was. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good weekend.
It was good to see you, Heiner. Thank you, everybody.
Josh, I'm getting often from this guy an invitation at the strangest times. Is it you, Gumdrops or so?
Jimmy
Yeah,
Gumdrops.
you have to delete the Clubhouse app. It's the Clubhouse app will notify you anytime I'm talking in any room on Clubhouse, and it's very annoying. So just feel free to delete it. It's from Clubhouse. It's not me.
Josh is Jimmy Gumdrops. That's his avatar on Clubhouse.
If it's really a topic I should attend, I mean, just listening, I don't need to talk, then you can let me know. But I didn't want it to be rude and not respond.
Yeah, just Oh, no, you're not being rude at all. Feel free to delete it. It's a very evasive app, so it will just keep notifying you for no reason. It's not me doing it. It's the app will do it on its own to try to engage you into the conversation.
But you are
Dialed.
there like a couple of times a week.
I'm there pretty much 2 to 3 hours a day, every day.
Oh, so it's your
Yeah.
clubhouse.
Yeah, it's an app that the way that it works is if you are following someone on the app and they go into a conversation, it automatically pings and notifies all the people following to try to get you to engage. It's not me doing it.
But what is your schedule? What are you doing? You're just attending or are you moderating? And which topics?
No, I am having multiple conversations at many times with hundreds and thousands of people on this app. It's sort of it's like GCC with 800 GCCs all happening all at once. Everything everywhere all at once.
And what are your topics?
It ranges from everything from music to you name it. Artist communities are some of the topics, regeneration. There's anything from you name it, flat earthers. It could be the list goes on. The topics are endless. It's a plethora of topics. And a lot of people don't hold to those topics. They're just bullshitting, talking to each other.
Yes, I felt
Yeah.
there's a focus needed. So I was just interested when you speak and what your topics are. And I know that your topics are from everything to everything.
Yeah, if I had something important, I would reach out to you directly. But if you see a notification from Clubhouse, it's just them. So it's not, sometimes it could be an amazing thing or it could be just complete bullshit. So,
Okay, got it.
yep. Thank you. Thank you so much, Heiner. Cheers.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Okay, and I think Sam is gone too, and I cannot end this thing because I don't have the power to end it. So I'm gonna disconnect and have lunch, and Sam can stop it when he wants to stop it. Sorry, I not overslept, but fell asleep and didn't come on at the right time. What you should do is send me some kind of an audible. Oh, there you are. Yeah, if you send me an audible, either ring my phone or if you can, I don't know, you can make, I don't think you can make noise on Facebook, can you? Actually, you could have started a messenger call on Facebook and that would have woken me up. I
Yeah, I
think.
think some of us did ping you on Messenger, but it's okay.
Yeah, but that's silent. That's not gonna wait. Text message is not gonna make a noise.
Yeah, sometimes if you set it this way, it can actually give you a notification.
If you had, no, but I'm on a desktop, not a smartphone, so
All right.
smartphones might ping, but desktops.
All right. So if you say that I should ping you on the phone, then I'll look up your phone number and ping you next time you're a little bit late.
Yeah. What happened is that I woke up in the middle of the night and I got up, well before normal get up time, and then I'm sitting here and I fell asleep. I didn't set an alarm to make
We've
sure
all done that, Barry. I've been doing
we've all
that.
done it right.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Barry.
Talk to you later.
I'll tell you
Bye-bye.